Good afternoon, everyone. We've got folks coming in from the waiting room, so we'll let everyone get settled here. All right. So, looks like we're good. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Brand, and I'm here on behalf of the CARE TA Center. I'd like to welcome you to our session today, and the two shall become one, featuring our presenter, Tanja Miles. Before we get started, we're going to go through just a couple of housekeeping things. Switch to our next slide here. Oh, because I'm not. There we go. So as I'd like to welcome everyone into this space, I'd like to let you know that everyone's cameras and audio has been disabled. If you have any comments, questions, anything like that, I do invite you to use the chat box. You can address all of your questions and comments to me, Angela Brand. I will use those later during our Q&A. I'll also be able to see those. That way I can help troubleshoot any issues that you might have throughout today's session. Additionally, because we are having everyone on mute, if you'd like to use any of the emoticons that are located at the bottom right hand of your screen, you'll see a little happy face with a plus next to it. Those Zoom emoticons are available for you to share any feedback throughout our session. Hearts, thumbs up, clapping, whatever inspires you. So I invite you to do that. Let's see, we will have the materials available to you. I'll drop those in the chat here in just a few minutes as we get our session started. And we will, at the end of today's session, have a feedback survey for you to fill out, and we'll share that link for you at the close of the session as well. So I'd like to get into just a few things here. This training is offered by the Crisis and Recovery Enhancement, or CARE Center, funded by the California Department of Healthcare Services, which is administered by the Center for Applied Research Solutions, or CARS. The views, opinions, and content expressed in the presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the California Department of Healthcare Services. In any cases of security issues, just know that if that happens, the session will end immediately and will not resume, and a separate email will be sent to all participants with further instructions. So as I said, you're able to use the chat box today. I welcome any questions or comments. You can direct those again to me, Angela Brand. Please use any I statements in the chat. We strongly recommend that folks do not use any stigmatizing or otherwise injurious language toward others. This is a safe and respectful space for all that are joining us. Your message will be received by me. I will filter all the comments as a whole. If there is anything that comes up that is harmful, we will not be reading that or repeating that or sharing that with the group. If you have any tech challenges, we do have one of our CVent hosts with us today. If you want to let us know through the chat, we can help troubleshoot any issues that you might have during the session. And we ask for your support in following these community agreements as outlined on the screen. And just as we get started, if for any reason you need to step away, take a break, or go to a quiet place at any time, please feel free to do so. We want everyone to feel welcome and safe in this space. And so take any time that you need throughout today's session. So as we begin, I'd like to invite our presenter, Tanja Miles, to introduce herself and speak to you today.
Thank you so much, Angela, and thank you for the CARE TA Center for the amazing work that you guys are doing, and the fact that you have put together this 2 days of information, and I believe also transformation for all of us. It's just a win-win. Thank you guys for participating in this training. I'm super excited that you're here today. I hope what is said will edify you, enlighten you, and encourage you, and that we can bring awareness, reduce stigma. You guys know the deal when it comes to mental health, substance abuse, and crisis. My name is Tanja Miles. I'm a certified peer support specialist. My husband and I have been in ministry for over 26 years. We're both licensed and ordained. We love the work that we do. We're more like street preachers, if you will. We love going outside of the four walls of the church and going to where the people are, into the prisons, on the streets where the hot spots are, just anywhere we can tell people that they are loved, that their life matters, and that there is hope. I wake up every day to push hope. I'm grateful that I get a chance to do that. I'm also a community activist, a veteran. I was in the military for 9 years as a military police. I love telling people about my story of recovery. I've been in recovery for over 36 years from crack cocaine. I'm a 3-time suicide attempt survivor. My diagnosis is PTSD. It's not because I was in the military, and I know most of the time people think PTSD, they think of battle and things of that nature, but mine come from a lot of years of untreated trauma from a lot of sexual abuse. So I love the work that I do. I'm excited about this session, and the two shall become one. When we marry people, my husband and I, that's kind of the line you say, and the two shall become one. So the fact that now we're able to sit down and talk about how important faith-based organizations are to our community, and how when you have access to treatment in other spaces, the two shall become one, and it's just a win-win. My husband and I, we started the first licensed faith-based treatment center in the state of Louisiana. It was kind of the first of its kind in the nation in 2004. We sold it in 2010, and it's still growing and going. I never forget when I was doing a lot of community work, and I had the opportunity to talk to someone in a position of authority. And I'm like, one day, I want to do something that's faith-based in treatment. And they basically told me, hell no, it's just not going to happen. But just so happened, you tell me no, and you got to tell me why. And if there's a way we can do it for the sake of people, we're going to do it. And so we were able to do that. The state bought our curriculum and our training, and then we were able to train a whole lot of organizations, not just in Louisiana, but across the country. And so I'm just excited about this work. I know when I first, got in recovery, the faith-based community didn't kind of know what to do with me, and they told me that. And that's when I thought, you know what, we can do a better job at helping people with addiction, destructive behavior, and mental health. And so that's what this training is all about. So at the end of this, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Angela is there to help answer them. And so we're going to have a really informative but a good time during this time. So again, I know you guys could be doing so many other amazing sessions because there's so many in the next 2 days, but the fact that you're here, I appreciate it. So let's get to it. We talk about, and the two shall become one, partnering faith with evidence-based and best practice programs and resources to heal communities in a time of crisis and need. Next slide. So what are some of our learning objectives? Let's talk about 4 main things that I hope that's a takeaway for you here today. And that's across the country, there's a growing movement to create safer, healthier, and more resilient communities. In large cities, local leaders are coming together to reduce violence, address poverty, and heal racial divide. Faith communities can play a critical role in these efforts. Violence, poverty, and suffering are challenges in many of our communities. As a member of the Faith Fellowship, you're in a unique position to help. And the 4th one, trauma can have serious consequences, but people are naturally resilient and healing is always possible. So I want to talk about trauma. I know we hear a lot about trauma in the news lately, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I really didn't know what trauma was until maybe 7 years ago, y'all. I finally got it. And I had an aha moment, because normally we talk about trauma, we think of brain injury when someone's playing football, they're in an accident. But what about, when life happened and there's event after event and trauma after trauma, and that does something to one's brain. And so we're gonna, talk about that, how churches can be more trauma informed. So when we open back up our doors after this pandemic, that we can best serve the people who are gonna need so much help. So many people have lost loved ones, lost their jobs, their whole life was disrupted. And a lot of people experience trauma, a lot of things that we've seen on the news, on social media, a lot of trauma. So how do we help people navigate through that? Next slide, please. So trauma-informed framework. Yeah, I can't make this up. So the last session, we did a short video telling you guys what this was gonna be about. Right after I got off of the session, I got a call from someone saying, I need you to call and talk to this mom. And as I was talking to this mom, son was 24, was having some anxiety and depression, wrote a suicide note. Of course, I told her the immediate things that she, needed to do. And so she did that. And while I was talking to her, I did ask her, she's like, well, I said, is he in counseling? She said, yeah, he's in church counseling. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, so can you tell me what that means? Well, he's just going to the pastor and the pastor's counseling. I'm like, okay, that's great. I said, well, did the pastor know he wrote a suicide note and turned in his keys at work? And she said, yeah. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, what did they say? Oh, well, they just said they were going to pray for him and just talk to him. Intentions were good. But guys, those are the kind of things in the faith-based community we have been, dealing with. We're going to see more of it. And so the fact that you're on this training to help you better know how to navigate that when someone is in crisis, what is the proper thing to do? Because we're talking about evidence-based best practices coming together is why we're having this conversation. Next slide, please. Look, the next slide basically just says it all. As a faith leader, you can make a difference. You can use this trauma-informed framework to help unite people with a common sense of values. Whether you are called to respond to individuals who can help or mass shootings, y'all, we have those. We see them like never before. Long-standing community issues. You can be more effective in trauma-informed practices and principles that guide your action. Many people have sought help through psychiatric and counseling. But many people seek to faith-based leaders. They seek to us first. We're kind of like the first line of defense. So the fact that we'll now have this information that can help us with resources, how to pray for people and also refer, because we're talking about the power of two shall become one, is what I'm hoping that you get out of this, and how we can help make our the folks that are in our communities of faith and our communities bring more resilience. Next slide. Thank you. So what is trauma? Not gonna lie, you guys, I thought trauma was something else, even being in this field for so long and being in recovery until 7 years ago when I had an aha moment, talking to a friend of mine who was a therapist and then going to therapy, because therapy ain't scary, and most folks who are healers, we need to have someone we can talk to. And so when trauma was told to me, and I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean trauma? What do you mean PTSD? How can I have PTSD? And when that was broken down to me, it just made a whole lot of sense. So that was the first time in my life a name was put in the pain. So what is trauma? Trauma is an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful, of life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning, their mental function, their physical, their social, emotional, and our spiritual well-being. When we talk about trauma, like I said, we think about a person, getting, hit when they're in a car wreck or if they're playing sports or things of that nature. But the science has showed that when a person has had trauma after trauma after trauma, it does something to the brain. We're not going to talk about it a lot, but I know in the field of crisis, we're talking a lot about ACEs, and how when the kids have these challenges as young folk and it's not dealt with, and what can happen. And, I was a prime example of that, just having a lot of issues, not really addressing them, not getting the proper treatment, because my parents didn't know what to do. They really didn't. I was told, you just pray, God gonna heal you, you're gonna be all right, and you keep it moving. And don't tell people your business. And so we've kind of been told those things. And so I never knew it was trauma. When I was having all these behavior issues, anger, depression, acting out, I didn't know it was trauma. And so now we're able to put a name with the pain, and I believe it's going to help free a lot of people. Next slide, please. So what are some of the causes of trauma? It could be bullying, natural disasters, epidemics, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, community violence, a whole lot of things, flight from home as a refugee. There are so many things that can cause trauma. Next slide. So let's talk about what the faith community can do. Well, we can have a trauma-informed leadership by breaking the silence and talking about violence and trauma in our community. I think that can be a game changer. When we say, you know what, people, instead of asking people, what people used to ask me. They used to ask me, Tanja, what the hell is wrong with you? And that was literally what they asked. But nobody never asked Tanja, what happened to you? And so now when we look into some of the ills that are happening in our society, we'll see that a lot of it comes from trauma, systemic racism, trauma just in the house. Maybe a parent wasn't there. Maybe, kids didn't have enough food, being incarcerated. There are so many things that, affect trauma. But as the faith-based community, now that we're able to put tools in our toolbox, we know what trauma is, why it's important to become trauma informed. We can make a big difference, not only in the lives of individuals, but in our community. Next slide. So compassionate community. Once we understand that trauma may be causing behaviors that we find most challenging, because when you see a kid, normally you ask, he's just a bad boy. Well, maybe, something happened to little Johnny. And that's why, he's having some of the issues. It is easier to respond without shaming or blame, because a lot of times, we're talking about reducing the stigma. People are ashamed to say something that happened to them if they were raped or if they come from a family of abuse. A lot of times people are ashamed to talk about it. And that's why it's so important that we're trauma informed. When a person is acting in ways you don't understand, try asking, has something happened to you? We talked about that a few minutes ago, rather than what's wrong with you. Even one caring response relationship can make a big difference. Next slide. So there are so many things, protective factors, and how we reduce things and how we bring resilience. We talk about resilience all the time. We talk about building resilience. How can we do that as a faith community? We can make sure that people know that their physical and emotional environments are safe. Wait, you need to tell me my space of faith might not be safe? Maybe not intentionally, but just by things that might be on our walls, things that we say that might be offensive, things of that nature. It could be. We want people to know that, we're going to create physical and emotional environments that are safe. A lot of times, some of the how we can reduce some of the risk is making sure that people have their basic needs met. Food pantries in the community, housing, healthcare, and education are met. In the faith-based community, we're good about that. We're good about feeding people. We're good about having after-school programs. So there are a lot of things that we're doing already to reduce risk, but we want to talk about other things we can do as well. Having strong families that know how to listen and support. Now you say, wait a minute, how to listen and support? Most families, everybody should know how to do that. Well, no, it could be different in that person's family. Maybe they wasn't raised by their mom nor their dad. Maybe it was by a grandmother, maybe it was an aunt or uncle, who knows, but, having spaces in our home, because healing begins at the house first. My mom always told me that charity begins at home and spreads abroad. So when we can help make healthy families, we can really help make our communities safer, healthy as well. Social networking and faith communities providing support when assistance is needed. We already know that at faith-based communities, we're able to kind of navigate quicker than most organizations. I never forget when we were part of Katrina, we were able to open up the first shelter for those who were coming from New Orleans. And so because we were faith-based, we didn't have to navigate through some of the red tape that, most government agencies do. So we're in good places to make sure that we're reducing those factors and building resilience, not just in our communities. We want to do it in individuals and families first. Next slide. So how do we support healing? Healing is as much as a spiritual journey as it is a medical or psychological one. All the world religions deal with suffering. We know that. Mother Teresa talked a lot about, suffering back in the days of Calcutta, but there's suffering going on here in America in the zip codes that we live in. And we need to provide a framework for survivors who are trying to experience healing. A lot of people want to be healed, but a lot of times they don't know what to do. A lot of times we think, well, we know what to tell people to do. Well, the first thing we need to do is really listen to them. I think that's the first phase of really, I call it hearing and healing, someone who comes into your space of faith. Trauma-informed faith counseling can be valuable. Many spiritual practices can also help support and heal trauma survivors. I mean, that's what we want to do. We want people to move past the hurt to the healing, and being trauma-informed and supporting people in their healing is what we can do as a faith-based community. And again, going back to best practices, going back to, evidence-based things that a lot of people are doing for us treatment providers. As a minister, some of us were licensed and ordained in different capacities. Some of us went to seminary school. Some of us went to college and we got our degrees in theological studies and things of that nature. But, as I talked to a lot of faith-based leaders around the community, I asked them, I said, in your spaces of learning, of education, was trauma talked about? No. Was addiction talked about? Well, maybe a little bit. Was mental health? Oh, no. Mental health has been a taboo for the faith-based community for many, many years. I never forget, I was afraid to tell people that I was depressed. And even when I tried to tell folk that, or people that were faith leaders that, look, I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm feeling some kind of way. I feel like I'm depressed. And they meant well, but they were like, well, Tanja, what you got to be depressed about? You're doing this, this, and this, and this. They meant well, but what that did was that kind of shut me down, because then I felt shame. I felt condemnation because they're telling me I shouldn't feel like this. Well, we all have feelings. I'm going to quote the great poet Drake. And, yes, I'm in my feelings. It's okay for people to feel. It's okay for that. And we have to allow those spaces. That's how we support healing, for people to heal. We talk to them and say, you know what, I hear you. I might not understand what you're going through, but I validate what you're saying. That right there is the beginning of healing. Again, going back to the mental health issue, when in the faith community, we were told, and I'm just talking about me right now, when people were depressed or going through anxiety, oh, that's just the devil. That's just the enemy. That ain't God and that ain't good. And what that did was that made people not want to talk about their real feelings, their authentic self, because already we were putting condemnation on them because the way that they were feeling. And we were telling them, you shouldn't feel like that. Again, good intentions, but good intentions can really help us. Good intentions can hurt people. And so that's why we're having these kind of conversations and these kind of trainings to help support people in their healing. Look, crisis happens every day. We all have crisis. And if anything, these last couple of years have taught us is that things happen in people community. And when they happen, we should be in a space where we're able to open up, to listen to people, what they're saying, to validate what they're saying. And not only that, to let them know that healing is their birthright. I don't care what denomination they're coming from. I don't care what zip code, what a county they're coming from, but healing is their birthright. And trauma is real. And having a trauma-informed space of faith, it could be your faith-based organization that provides housing, that provides shelter, that provides food. You can be more trauma-informed. And even if it's people coming to, the synagogue on a mosque or, the temple or the church on Sundays, you can be trauma-informed. Even by the way we speak to people when they're in the parking lot, trauma-informed. Even when they walk in the door, trauma-informed. And as we're speaking messages of hope, help, and we're talking about healing again, making sure we're sensitive to who the people are, in our congregation, and that all of us have been through a whole lot in the last couple of years. So just imagine people who've been through a whole lot on top of COVID, but then also a lot of the racial injustice that's going on. Also, just a lot of the violence that is going on. So that's a lot for anybody. So that's just the stuff that's going on as a nation. But what about the things that are going on in their house? Their kids' life have been disrupted. Maybe they lost their job, which means they lost their insurance. That's real. Or maybe it's their lost loved ones due to COVID. People are going through so much. And the more trainings and the more things that we can use will help us. So here's the deal. We know that as faith-based communities, we're good at encouraging people. We're good at praying with people. We're good at, just hugging on them and loving on them. But now when we partner with organizations, throughout the county that's doing, trauma work, that's doing crisis, that's doing mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment, that's where the two become one. And we become workers together because we all need each other. None of us can do this by ourselves. So when we reach out to those treatment providers in our county and say, look, I would love to sit down and talk about the work that you're doing and the work that we're doing and how we can partner, the two shall become one. When we reach out to, those organizations and say, look, I have some space in my building. Maybe you want to come and not only, be a blessing to the people in our congregation, but the people in our county, or the people in our zip code. The two shall become one. And that's how we make this work. And the power to refer. One of the things that the CARES, TA Center has done so well is asset mapping. And we talked about that a little bit in our last video. And what asset mapping is that the beauty of it is just amazing thing. It's where you can go in, put in a zip code, and then all of those resources that a person needs is right there basically at your fingertips. That makes us so much better as a faith-based organization, because we know when someone comes to us and say, look, I'm having an issue with opioids, or I'm struggling with addiction. And of course we want to, validate their feelings. We want to let them know that they're heard, that they're seen. We want to, be able to, if you feel led, to pray with that person. But the other thing you want to be able to say is that, you know what, there is help. Let's do this. And you can sit down with them at a computer or right here on our phones and just show them how to, asset map. What a beautiful thing. Again, the two shall become one. So we know that, as faith, we got the prayer part working, but now we're getting the resources to the people that they need. And that's, again, I keep saying it, it's a beautiful thing. It really is. The two becoming one. There's an amazing thing to know that when people walk away from us, we have given them hope. We have given them help. And then that just promotes their healing, whatever that journey looks like. And so, tomorrow we're going to get into some more things about, trauma, about, resources. We're going to talk about, the 3 E's. We're going to talk about how, when a person comes to you, how are you trained to deal with trauma? How are you trained to deal with trauma? Because some things, again, you're going to be able to do right there, in your own your own place of faith, but then you're going to have to know how to refer them out to the necessary professionals that can maybe take their level of care to the next level. Again, we're workers together with our Creator. We're workers together with God. We all need each other. None of us can do this work, by ourselves. And the other thing is that, in years we have been doing it by ourselves and we've done a pretty good job. But now to know that we'll be able to take, our healing, our training, our compassion, our resources to the next level to build a resilient community is what our community needs like never before. I want to thank each and every one of you for the work that you already do in the community. Know that what you do matters. Know that you're not alone. Know that we all need each other. And having spaces like this, that's why I'm so excited, about this conference, that there's so many different resources that we can put. We tell people in recovery, take the tool, put it in your toolbox, because one day you're going to need it. And this is just a tool that we all need, that we can help people support in their healing. Again, like my mama said, charity begins at home and then it spreads abroad. Healing starts first in the house. And when we encourage people, when we give people the resources and tools they need to heal, it makes for a strong individual. It makes for a resilient community, and it makes for a great country. Next slide. So at this time, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to, talk to me about, you can put them in the chat. Angela's looking at them now, and we will answer any questions that you might have. Again, I just want to say thank you guys. The slides that you see, we're going to have those available to you, so you can go back over it and, and look at what trauma is, how it affects, our community and our country, and ways that you can become a trauma-informed place of faith. Angela?
Thank you so much for that. So many wonderful things. And I keep thinking about something you shared at the first session about how healing is our birthright and just how much work we have to do. But when we aim it in conversations like this, it feels possible. So I really thank you for everything that you've shared with us today. And if you have any questions for Tanja, go ahead and put those into the chat. I can see the chat box here, so let us know, and I'll get those materials together to load up into the chat box as well.
And then I have a few questions as I'm gonna, kind of ask you guys to just think about and consider Angela as well.
Absolutely.
I guess one of the things I would like to ask people, have they ever heard of a trauma-informed approach? I know that, we talked about that a lot, but have anybody had ever heard of that before? Is it their first time hearing about a trauma-informed approach? And maybe you heard it, during your healthcare provider or a mental health professional, but, wow, having one in our place of faith.
That's a great question. So yeah, if anyone has any feedback or anything they'd like to add, please go ahead and use the chat function.
While they're doing that, one of the other things that I wanted to comment on is, we talked a little bit about, childhood trauma and the ACEs. And if you guys don't know anything about that, I really suggest that, you look it up. I mean, it's a really great tool. I think we're going to be surprised on how easy it is, and how non-threatening it is. And I never forget when, those 10 questions were posed to me, and I was kind of like a 7 out of 10. And for a minute I felt hopeless, but then I'm like, no, Tanja, you're safe. You're not that little girl. You can't let the things define you. So I think that ACEs is a great tool that needs to be used and, talked about more when it comes to untreated childhood trauma. When I was a little girl, I always wanted to sing on Broadway. I was this little girl with the buck teeth, with the big old forehead, and I loved to make people smile. And I was in a community choir, and there was a song that was written. It wasn't written for me, but it was written for me to sing. And it went like this: I am just a child, I know. Everything I am will grow. Things that hurt when I am small grows much bigger when I'm tall. I had no idea I'd basically be prophesying what my life would look like because of untreated trauma. Those things that hurt me when I was small, they came back to bite me in a vicious way. But I'm so grateful, because of my faith. I'm so grateful because of, my recovery and having places to go, that I was able to get past all that hurt and the healing began. So childhood trauma is something that we definitely need to talk more about in our community.
That's beautiful. And I agree. You said something at the beginning of the session as well about PTSD and the assumptions that folks might make about PTSD being linked to, one, very physical or very catastrophic, event or experience. But, there's so many little things that can happen to us in our lives that, can contribute to that. So I think these conversations and really unpacking them and really better understanding, it can be something that we see as a quiet event almost when we look back and we think, well, that was small. That might have been insignificant. I couldn't possibly, have any sort of, longstanding, effects from that. So, I thank you for sharing that. I always write down like little notes and I put them on stickies and kind of put them up around my office. And those are a few of the things that, they're really important reminders in this work that we have such varied experiences.
Right. And, like I said, when I was able to put a name with the pain, I just thought I was angry all the time. I just thought I was pissed off, just mad. And people used to ask me, why are you so mad? And I'll never forget when I was in the military, one guy asked me, why are you so violent? And I think that's when it clicked that I had never been called violent before, but that's what I was because I didn't know what to do with all that, that packed pain. And so when I was diagnosed with PTSD, I felt free. I felt like, okay, that's why I act like that. I wasn't crazy. That's why that behavior was. And so it all made sense. And when it made sense, it opened up the opportunity for me to be my authentic self and to share my hurt in a place where I felt safe. Mm-hmm. And that was liberating for me. So when we begin to put a name with the pain, I think that really helps people out. And so talking about trauma is something that we, more conversations we need to have like we're doing now.
Absolutely. And so we do have a few comments and questions that have come in from Clinisha. Yes, God is our healer, but we also have to deal with the root of the trauma, cut the root so it can no longer grow.
That's right.
And then we have a message here from Brad. As clinicians, we are sometimes trained to check our own values and beliefs. It's nice to see faith integrated into behavioral health treatment so well. And another question here from Carosco. Latinos are generally closed off, especially males. What can we do to push through that?
Yeah, so that's a good one, and I'll start off with answering the last question, then I'll comment on the other comments from our other participants. But you're right, and it's almost the same thing with, Black men, because for the most part, we tell them, their masculinity, as being Latino and then being a Black man, you got to be strong. You got to suck it up. You bet not cry. Oh my God. I know I remember my dad telling my brother that, and even me, and I know he meant well because my brother was really emotional and my dad meant well. I love my dad. I'm my dad's daughter, but it was almost like because my brother was a little sensitive, he kind of, it was like, I got to toughen you up, I can't. And again, I believe we mean well, but those are the kind of things that we have to kind of do a paradigm shift in our conversations. We have to let our men know that, you know what, you're human. You have feelings. Feelings are okay. It's that when those feelings take over us, then when it's a challenge. So I think that, early on, having these conversations with our young boys, telling them, it's okay to feel, that's okay. It's okay to show, your sensitive side, whatever that looks like. So I think that's one of the ways we can do it. And then hopefully we have other men like who are on this panelist who are clinicians, to talk about it more. Cause I think it comes a little bit better from another man. I'm just saying that's how men are, and we know how challenging it is for men as it is. I mean, I got a husband and I'm like, dude, you work hard. We got good insurance. I don't understand why you going to a doctor is an issue, but you taking the truck to get service. I'm confused with that. Do you love the truck more on your body? I'm just saying, but you know how they are. So I think having these conversations and letting them know it's okay. It's okay to feel. It's okay to do that. And then I want to talk about, someone mentioned about the root cause. You're absolutely right. We have to get to the root cause of what's going on for real, and not be a surface. And now I believe that, when we're open and honest, with people, to let them know that, healing is their birthright, and to less, asking them to dig deep. And it might not be in a church setting, but they can go somewhere else, again, to a professional who knows trauma, because you can't tell them better your stuff. And everybody does not know trauma trained. trauma counseling. Let's go ahead and put that out there. But you can be trauma informed, if I'm making any sense. So getting to that root cause is what we have to do. And, you're absolutely right about, having a place now, as a professional, as a licensed social worker, you can incorporate faith. And people's faith is going to look different. And then being okay with that, not just being, cookie cutter without faith and go, well, if it ain't that way, it ain't the right way. That ain't trauma informed. So you're absolutely right. And now that we're able to share, in those treatment spaces about faith, is a game changer for the people that we serve.
Absolutely. A couple more comments here. Brad shares as well. It seems, it has seemed at times as though faith and treatment are dichotomous rather than integrated. We have another one here from Jenny. I think those attitudes come from our intergenerational trauma experience, quote unquote, toughening up our children because we believe the world is an unsafe place. And then some agreement from Carrasco. Yes, I've worked with Black males and it was like a tug of war with admitting their issues, but they were okay with me calling them out in a way because I was another man. Yeah.
And that's good. And thank you for sharing that. And I think when it comes from other men, one of the things that we did, so we had last year, we had an uptick in African-American male suicide. Y'all know that's not really the normal, way when it looks like, what demographic, is more prone to do death by suicide. But in our area, at one point we had, I think, 2 a month. So that was 8 in 4 months. And so we had to rally. And so one of the things we did this thing called My Brother, You Matter. And so it was to let, Black men who were seeing a whole lot of, racial injustice on TV, who thought that they were being, preyed upon. I felt like that they were being preyed upon. A lot of them were just going through a whole lot of stuff, as you guys know. And so we had we had a virtual event where it was put on by, some men that I knew, and I asked them to take lead on it. And it was a beautiful thing. And so, it gave safe spaces for men to talk about, some of the emotional stuff that they were feeling because of what they're seeing on TV. And I think, when we have more spaces like that, we'll get more men to open up because, even in recovery, I'm so glad that we're even doing stuff that maybe be gender specific. For example, being a woman who's been, raped and had a lot of sexual assault. I don't feel comfortable sharing that in a group with, when it's male and female. I feel better when it's, just with, other women, even though not saying that men don't, get abused, but for me, it was just better, just my choice. So, having spaces like that, we have to do it. And particularly in the faith community, we have to really come up to that level. And then, you're right about, making our kids to be tough because we do live in a society that, that might not be conducive for healing. I mean, we need to talk about that in the faith community. How do we make, our community conducive for healing? Because we can, we want to make sure our kids are whole and healthy when they walk out the house, because we know what's about to happen when they leave, our doorsteps. And look, I think that's when we talk about the pair of 2 ACEs. We talked about adverse childhood experience, but what about the adverse community experiences? And so, talking about those as well. And look, faith with treatment. Faith without works is dead. We know we can tell people to go through the steps. We know we can get a good treatment plan, but we know that it takes work. And then that's where faith comes in, them doing the work.
Absolutely. Some agreement here in the chat box. Another comment here. A lot of African-American men look for people who look like them or can relate, then they will slowly open up and share, etc. So yeah, if there's any other questions or comments or anything before we close out, go ahead and put those into the chat. And we will have, a question came up earlier, the materials and the recordings from these sessions will be put together and shared with everyone. I know a lot of times with conferences and events, it's, you have a couple of different sessions to choose from. And so the great thing about this virtual platform is that with everything being recorded, if you were able to attend this session but wanted to see something else taking place at the same time, we'll have a library of resources, including the materials and the recordings for all of these, the sessions today and tomorrow that let's see. One question here popped up. What training do you use for staff? From Sharon in Merced County.
So you can go, SAMHSA, of course, has some of the, the best stuff that's out there. And then also a lot of our partners like RI and others that are, part of this framework and part of this, part of this whole conference. You can go to their websites. They have so much stuff. Even the Care TA Center, you can get different trainings from them. Just depend on where you are. I know that a lot of organizations are just being introduced, to ACEs, and so there are a lot of so there's a lot of stuff out there. But I do recommend going to like NAMI. NAMI does a lot of training, not only for communities but faith organizations, for staff. So I think, starting at NAMI, SAMHSA, and would just, be the way to go. And like I said, a lot of the sponsors that are part of this conference as well.
Thank you. As staff to NAMI California, I definitely appreciate the shout out to NAMI. But yes, I mean, there's a library of resources from NAMI and other community-based organizations that specialize in this work. So lots of folks out there wanting to do right by the world. Let's see, go back and check here. Lots of thank yous. And then I'm having some technical difficulties on my end getting the presentation into the chat. So I will fix that before the next session. But in the meantime, we definitely will have all of the materials and the recordings available. So even if you can't pull it down now, it will be on the the Care TA Center website after the conference is over. So I apologize for that to everyone in the session right now. More thank yous from Crosco and Sharon and Jenny. And thank you all for sharing your reflections, asking questions, and engaging with us through this session here. I'm going to go ahead and invite our CVent support to put in our feedback link. This is for those of you today, we just ask for you to fill out the short form sharing any feedback on today's session. Thank you, Marcus. That's now in the chat for everyone to see. We still have a few more minutes if folks have questions, but definitely fill out that feedback survey. That will help the Care TA Center team and the conference planning team hear about what folks really enjoyed and what we can do more of. And I think too, if we don't have any other questions coming in, if you have any last things to share with the group, Tanja, we can always.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angela. No, thank you so much, for real. I really appreciate you and the work that NAMI does. That wasn't a shameless plug. That was really sincere and just really, real deal. Because again, we need all the resources that we can get, have in our toolbox and get to the people that we serve. And I'm just so grateful that when I was told no, that, faith and, treatment and evidence-based best practice and science could never, come together. And the fact that it has now, look, we've all had to evolve. And I'm grateful that the faith-based community, more than anybody, because I think, we were the one with the most like, we can't do that. We can't bring science, into our, sessions when we're praying for people and things like that. And I always tell people, I'm like, well, let me ask you a question. I said, being a faith leader, when a person come to you and they say, you know what, I'm having some chest pains and my left side is hurting and my left arm is hurting. I say, what do you tell them? Well, well, that sounds like it could be a heart attack. So, I'll tell them to go to the doctor. I'm like, oh, okay. I said, so if a person was coming to you and saying, you know what, I love the message that you said, but I'm having trouble reading the program or, reading a screen, I can't see. And I said, what would you tell them? Well, I would probably tell them they would, go and need to see an eye doctor, optometrist. And matter of fact, I know a good one. There's one in the church. I'm glad you said that. So if someone's coming to you saying that they're having depression or anxiety, then what would you tell them? Oh, you're setting me up, Tanja. I'm like, no, I'm just asking you a question, and they were like, oh, I get it. I'm like, yeah. So a lot of people are getting it now on both sides. So I'm just grateful that we live in a side. We still got a lot of work to do, but I'm grateful that we're kind of seeing this whole paradigm shift and the two, shall become one.
Wonderful. Fantastic. So I have a couple more thank yous for such a wonderful presentation. Folks sharing some praise here on this side for you. I haven't had any other questions come up, so I will just say again, the materials and the recording for today's session will be shared on the CARE TA Center site after the conclusion of the conference events. And we just encourage everyone to fill out the attendee feedback survey. And I think for now, if we don't have any other questions, we can go ahead and close out, give folks a—
And come tomorrow.
I was just going to say, give folks a few minutes to pop back into the main session to see what events we have coming up for the rest of the afternoon, and to check out the agenda for tomorrow. You can attend Tanja's session tomorrow as well. Did you want to give them a little bit of information on tomorrow's session?
Yeah, so tomorrow's going to be great. So the first one we're doing is we come this far by faith. So why stop now? So how we can continue, on this mission to help people heal. And, what does that look like even more in depth, and that's going to be great. And then we're going to have another session, and that's at 1:30 to 2:30 tomorrow, where it's just going to be open to you guys, where you get to ask any question or comments. We want to hear from you. Remember, this all is about listening and learning. So we want to hear from you. So we're going to have those two sessions. The first one is from 11:15 to 12:15. We've come this far by faith, so why stop now? So we want to give you that extra push to keep on moving and keep on grooving, because I know you're doing a lot of amazing work. And then at 1:30 to 2:30, we just want to open it up where we hear from you, where you share your heart. And then that'll give us ways that we can push more resources or, technical assistance just to help you. So yeah, come on back tomorrow.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Excuse me. Thank you so much for everything that you shared today, getting folks pumped and ready for tomorrow. And for the rest of you, thank you for joining us on the session today. If you have any questions, comments, please go ahead and enter those into your feedback survey. We will close out today's session, give you a few extra minutes to do human things, as Eliana has shared before. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you in the next sessions. Thanks, everyone.